When our son, Mike, suddenly vanished, my husband, Tom, didn't offer me any comfort. Not shedding a single tear at Mike's final farewell. He stared at Mike's portrait, grumbling. "He's always been in my way. Because of him, I had no need for Tom, who glared with such resentment. Clutched in my shaking hands was Mike's suicide note. Now, it's my turn to take revenge on Tom in Mike's place. My name is Mary, a 53-year-old part-time working housewife. Tom and I were high school classmates. Attracted to each other not for standing out but for being just ordinary. After graduation, Tom moved to Boston for college, and I found employment as a secretary at a small local architectural firm. Long-distance relationships don't last. Airfare's too expensive. It's your fault for not going to college, Mary. I was constantly blamed, and as work got busier, it didn't even take us a year to part ways. Why did we end up marrying, you ask? It was because I bumped into Tom again after he graduated and found a job in Boston. I felt secure in Tom's unchanged simplicity. In hindsight, maybe I was just rushing to marry before turning 30. He was still the miserly type, quick to blame others for anything. It was an odd fate that brought us together as husband and wife, but having been blessed with a son and a daughter, I guess it was worth it. Then, a joyful event took place in our household. Our son, Mike, who had just turned 23, brought home a charming young woman. "Mom, I'm bringing someone over this Sunday. It's someone Dad knows." "What?" I was surprised when I got the call. I hadn't expected him to bring his fiancée. That's because Mike has been shy and reserved since he was young, not the type to actively approach women. I always thought Mike was handsome and popular with the ladies. But our daughter Anne, who is 2 years his senior, seemed to have seen through him, blessing Mike's engagement. On the other hand, both Tom and I were anxious that morning. "Mike said on the phone that it's someone you know too, Tom?" "What? What did he say the name was?" Tom asked back awkwardly. "I didn't ask that far. We were to be introduced at the engagement announcement today. I didn't know either. Maybe it's the grocery store cashier Tom always goes to at night, or perhaps someone from his workplace." Thinking lightly of it at that moment might have been a mistake. I was over the moon about Mike bringing a woman home for the first time. If only I had noticed the unease in Tom's darting eyes. "Linda here. Mike and I met through a friend. Pleased to meet you." "Linda. How adorable. Mike's really outdone himself," I replied to Linda's brisk introduction. Between you and me, I secretly thought Mike was too good for her. Mike followed in Tom's footsteps, attending a university in the city, then returning home to work for a food manufacturer. I was disappointed when he decided to rent an apartment close to his workplace. But when he handed me a spare key, asking me to come over and make my favorite dishes, I couldn't have been happier. My Mike always treating me with such care. As a parent, I couldn't help but feel Linda, with her flashy appearance, didn't quite match up to my upstanding son, Mike. Ah, Linda. I think I remember meeting her at a restaurant we went to for a business dinner. Tom, scratching the back of his head, seemed to recall meeting her after hearing the introduction. As the sales department manager, Tom often used that restaurant for entertaining clients, and it seems Linda remembered him as a regular. Tom, a man who could be anyone in middle age. I figure Linda probably only remembered him by the title on his business card. So, that's how you knew Dad. Linda's beautiful, isn't she? I always think she's too good for me. Not at all. I love your face, Mike. Linda, intertwining her arm with Mike's as she blushed, made me wonder when I raised a son to be so openly affectionate with women. Well, he was never immune to women's charms. Getting married at 23. Mike's decision to marry in his second year of working felt a bit early, but if they were happy, I wholeheartedly wanted to bless their union. I would come to regret not noticing the flames of jealousy in Tom's eyes at that time. 6 months after the wedding went off without a hitch. I thought I could breathe a sigh of relief, only to find myself overwhelmed with chores while still working part-time. Despite initially planning to rent an apartment and live alone, Mike changed his mind during their honeymoon, wishing to live with us. Does Linda agree with moving in? Of course. Linda lost her mom when she was young and wants to learn a lot from you, Mom. Thank you. I hesitated to welcome Mike and his bride into our 20-year-old home, but it was Mike's wish. I couldn't complain about becoming busier. I've missed living with you, but feel free to use my room too. Our daughter, just having graduated from junior college, offered her help for Mike and his new wife by renting an apartment nearby. After discussing with Tom, we remodeled the kitchen, bathroom, and toilet to make them more comfortable for the newlyweds. Mom, thank you. It's like brand new. You did all this remodeling for me and Linda. On moving day, Mike, bright-eyed as he carried in boxes, said, "The new bed is a wedding gift from Tom." Dad, thank you. It's only natural as a parent. Linda, I hope you like the mattress. Watching Linda bounce happily on the bed, Tom looked on with pleasure. I'll work to pay back the remodeling costs from now on. Don't be cheeky. I never expected you, with your meager earnings, to pay us back. Tom was cold to the earnest Mike, despite having smiled at Linda. His long-standing neglect due to work had finally taken its toll. I'm not sure if he wanted to assert his authority as a father, but from that day, Tom's attitude toward Mike became haughty. Do Mike and Linda have no sense of restraint? Just because it's their day off, they stay in bed all morning. It's fine. They're newlyweds. They should enjoy their time together, I said with a smile, trying to calm Tom's anger. Perhaps we could have afforded a duplex for Mike if he got married 10 years later. But this was sudden, and we couldn't manage that much. The kitchen, toilet, and bathroom are shared with us, so Tom is irritated by the disruption to our living rhythm. I'll leave Mike and Linda's meals in the fridge. I'm off to my part-time job. It's a busy day on sale days. I hurriedly took off my apron, glancing at the clock. What about lunch? What? I had hoped for a simple goodbye. Frustrated by Tom's childish remark, always thinking only of himself. Your meal is in the fridge too. Mike said they're eating out. Everyone takes the breadwinner for granted. How can I eat alone? I'm going out for some slot machines to change my mood. Throwing the newspaper on the couch, Tom grabbed his jacket and left the room. I'm sorry. I just couldn't take the day off. I wondered if my words reached Tom's back. Even if they didn't, it didn't matter. I had no expectations for Tom, who always felt neglected and suffered from delusions of persecution. Oh, marriage is indeed a test of patience. Mom, long time no see. Dad seemed upset. Did something happen? Startled, I turned to find Anne standing behind me. Anne. It's just Tom being his usual self. Childish, even at his age. I hate that about him. Yes. But we have to appreciate that he's provided for the family for decades, right? Well, yes. If only he weren't so pompous. I can't stand his sulking. Right. The portraits you draw of Tom are always so grumpy. Daughters are indeed a blessing. Talking about old times with Anne, my grievances against Tom seemed to fade away. I'm glad you're doing well, Anne. I have to head to my part-time job now. I'll be back by evening. Okay, but I can't wait until then. I just stopped by to talk to Mike. Oh, I think Mike and Linda are still sleeping upstairs. Is that so? Mike and Linda always seem so close. And laughed, looking up at the living room ceiling. Her eyes weren't smiling, suggesting she was troubled by something. I wished she had called ahead. I would have liked to prepare her favorite dish. I left for my part-time job, feeling a tug at my heartstrings. That evening, Tom didn't come home. Tom, who only indulged in slots as a casual hobby for no more than an hour, left the lunch I'd stored in the fridge untouched. As dinner time approached without a single message from him, worry began to set in. Mom, welcome back. You must be tired from your part-time job. What? I was surprised to be greeted by Mike, whom I thought wasn't home. Mike, weren't you going out with Linda today? Yeah, we did go out. Mike gave a weak smile. Since getting married, Mike had always seemed happy, but now there was an uncharacteristic gloom in his expression. Did you two have a fight? By the way, and came by, didn't she? Yeah, she did. We talked for a bit. Maybe and has found someone special? Thinking about marriage? There are things she can only talk to you about, after all. The siblings have always been close. Whenever Anne fell and cried, Mike was quick to pick her up and soothe her with a head pat. If there was a contest for brothers comforting their sisters, Mike would win hands down. Our album is filled with such precious memories. Then, I'll make dinner for you two as well. I bought some fresh meat on sale today. Let's have steak. Mom, thank you. Linda probably won't be back for dinner, so it'll just be the two of us. What? Mike's comment, as if he knew Linda and Tom wouldn't be returning home, left me pondering. This would be the first dinner just between Mike and me since they moved in. Mom, it's delicious. Thank you for always. Mike always expressed his gratitude before eating, warming me to the core. It was more rejuvenating than any luxurious bath bomb. Late that night, Tom came home, humming a tune and in high spirits. Tom, where have you been all this time? That's none of your business. His mood was good, but his attitude remained poor. Best not to stir the pot. I took great care not to even mention Tom's disheveled thinning hair. Has Mike gone to bed? Yes, probably. Normally, the question would be about both Mike and Linda, but this time it was just about Mike, which felt odd. For the first time in a while, Mike and I had dinner just the two of us. You know how Mike used to eat so little when he was younger? But tonight, he finished a huge steak. What? Just the two of you indulging? With whose money do you think? There's some saved for you too. It's your fault for not coming home. You always talk back like that. That's the problem. If you were younger and more submissive, I wouldn't have to do things like this. Do things like what? Did he accidentally let something slip? Tom covered his own mouth. Could it be debt? Or embezzlement of company funds? My mind raced to conclusions. Given Tom's high salary for someone in his 50s, and considering his appearance, an illicit affair seemed out of the question. Dad, you're home early. Mike interrupted us, as if to prevent an argument. Mike, don't startle me like that. Dad, we need to talk. Seeing Mike's troubled expression, I thought perhaps Linda wanted to end their cohabitation. I want to hear this too. Sorry, Mom. I want to have a man-to-man talk with him since it is going to be the last time. Told it was a conversation for men, I refrained from pressing further. Tom appeared to be annoyed yet defensively poised. All right, I'll go upstairs. Mike, who had never directly voiced his opinions to Tom, might have felt that becoming a working adult put him on equal footing. But he said, since it is going to be the last time, right? An ominous atmosphere. I watched their backs as they ascended the stairs, filled with a restless anxiety. I don't know what Mike and Tom talked about that day. All I know is that Tom came down from the upstairs looking pale. I pretended to sleep, fearing that asking would only worsen his mood. The next morning's atmosphere was like that of a funeral. Tom, Mike, and Linda were all silent, feeling the air too tense to inquire about their return. "Linda, good morning. Did you and Mike have a fight yesterday?" I asked cheerfully. "Don't ask unnecessary questions," Tom snapped at me, defending the silent Linda. "Mom, I'm sorry." "What? Why are you apologizing?" "Like I said, Mike, don't be saying things that aren't necessary." Faced with Tom's yelling whenever I spoke, I went out to hang the laundry. Little did I know that these would be Mike's last words to me. By that evening, Mike was gone. "Mike, why? How could this?" I was informed by the police and rushed to the hospital where Mike was being kept, feeling like I was in a dream. It felt like watching a TV drama. I couldn't stop shaking the entire taxi ride. I tried calling Tom and Linda's smartphones several times on my way to the hospital, but couldn't get through to either. When I called Tom's company, I was told he had taken 3 days of paid leave. The news was shocking, and I felt a mix of anger, panic, and nausea. "Mom, why? What happened to Mike?" And was already at the hospital when I arrived. Seeing me, she ran over with tears in her eyes. "I don't understand what's going on. I can't reach Tom or Linda." "Unforgivable." "What?" I hugged and who was trembling with rage, as we braced ourselves so we wouldn't faint and faced the changed Mike. "We did everything we could. I'm sorry." According to the doctor, Mike had suddenly darted into the street and was hit by a car that couldn't avoid him. The driver was still being questioned by the police, but it was suggested that Mike might have run out to save a kitten on the road. "There's not a single scratch on his face." "Mike! Mike!" And I cried out, our voices filling the room, desperately praying it was all just a dream. After confirming it was Mike, there was no time to grieve. I was swamped with hospital paperwork, arranging the funeral, and contacting Mike's employer. I called Linda and Tom hundreds of times throughout the day, but their smartphones were unreachable. I nearly fainted several times. With the help of Anne and my parents, I somehow managed to make it through the funeral arrangements. "What the hell is he doing?" My father's anger finally erupted. Linda's father, who should have been the chief mourner, was also desperately looking for Linda but lamented that he couldn't reach her. "When I called his company, they said he'd taken 3 days of paid leave. Maybe he's blocking my calls because he recognizes my number." "In a time like this, who goes off to play?" "Fine. I'll call him." With that, my father called Tom. It seems Tom couldn't ignore the call from my father. My father's raised voice filled the room. "Listen, you better come back by tomorrow." Apparently, Tom had flown to Anchorage, and Linda was with him. "I wasn't informed about any trip they were planning together." Was he lonely eating lunch by himself? Is it because I enjoyed dinner with Mike? To spite me? Such a juvenile act, going on a trip with Linda as some form of harassment. I was too dumbfounded to say anything, just cursing Mike's luck on the day of the accident. On the day of the funeral, a sullen Linda and Tom showed up. "It's all his fault. Because of him, I'm miserable. He took everything from me. I was just taking back what's mine." Tom glared at Mike's portrait. Linda and I were about to eat something delicious together. How could you even call yourself a father? My father was furious at Tom's absurd remark. Seeing his intensity, Linda hid behind Tom. In that moment, I felt as if the reason for my unease all this time became clear. Shouldn't a wife be rushing to Mike, crying out in grief? Why is she seeking comfort from Tom, of all people, despite their closeness? Linda, it's okay. What? Though everyone was puzzled about what was okay, the funeral began, and they both started crying into their handkerchiefs. Mike, why did you leave me? How am I supposed to live now? Mike, call me Dad one more time, Mike. Their crying seemed exaggerated, as if meant to draw sympathy from the attendees. Yet, I saw it. The moment they exchanged smiles. Were they plotting something? I wanted to confront them right there, but held back. This was a ceremony to say goodbye to Mike. As the funeral neared its end, it was time to read a letter Mike had left. What? Mike left a letter? It's Mike's will. I only found out about it yesterday. Indeed. The letter had been mailed to and by Mike. And hadn't opened it, saying it was addressed to me. I read the letter immediately upon receiving it, feeling nearly mad with anger. What does it say? Don't rush me. I'm about to share Mike's last thoughts carefully. Anger trembled in my hands as I held Mike's suicide note. Now, in Mike's place, it's my turn to take revenge on Tom. I resolved to read the letter myself, standing in front of the microphone. The first half of the letter might be tear-inducing, but it contains the evidence of Mike's 23 years of life. Supported by Anne, I took a deep breath and began reading. It started with words of gratitude for Mike's cherished friends, grandparents, mentors, bosses, and colleagues. Then, it moved to express appreciation to his beloved sister and, promising to watch over her. For me, there were words of thanks for giving birth to him, and apologies for causing worry. It's okay for parents to worry. You don't have to apologize. I wished I could go back to that moment and hug him with all my might, recalling Mike's last words. Sobs could be heard from the attendees. At the same time, murmurs of confusion spread. There were no words for his father and wife. And questions arose about the existence of a suicide note after an accidental death. Could it be that Mike? My mother began to voice everyone's suspicions. Perhaps he had taken his own life. Honestly, I didn't know. What a failure of a mother I am for speaking so lightly. Holding back tears, I bit my lip and continued reading the letter. Dad, thank you for taking care of me for 23 years. Tom's face, previously scowling at Mike's portrait, suddenly softened. Perhaps wanting to appear as a good father in front of the relatives. But I wasn't buying it. I heard about you and Linda. I tried to put it behind me since it happened before I knew Linda, but I was shocked to learn it continued. The attendees, expecting more words of gratitude, began to murmur, as their gaze shifted to Tom and Linda. Linda, sensing something, went pale. Now I understand why Linda had said she wanted to live with my family during our honeymoon. Perhaps sweating. Linda clutched her handkerchief and began to tremble. The large bed Dad gifted us was for Linda and... Please stop! Stop reading the letter! Linda attempted to snatch the letter from my hands, but her father grabbed her. Shame on you! I didn't raise you to be like this! He shouted, holding Linda by the neck as she wailed. A relationship between me and Linda? Where's the proof? There are plenty of homes where the daughter-in-law and father-in-law go out together. Tom's denial, whether stubborn or foolish, was loud. The proof is with me. A friend from my junior college told me about Dad and Linda's affair. What? The world is small. It turns out, Dad's frequented restaurant for entertaining was where Linda worked, owned by my friend's family. She even introduced Mike to Linda. What? Dad and Linda weren't just eating there, they were kissing. What? That's ridiculous. I debated whether to tell Mike. If I knew it would come to this, I wish I hadn't. And became tearful. Even without Anne's confession, it was only a matter of time before Mike discovered their affair. I resolved to read this part of the letter. Anne told me, but I had already realized. And don't blame yourself. Could you avenge me in my place? I want this exposed to everyone. And collapsed upon hearing this. The worst. Scumbag! Inhuman. Voices condemning Tom filled the room, and Tom himself slumped to the ground. I continued reading Mike's letter as if delivering the final blow. I no longer recognized the dad I knew. I'm grateful for being sent to college, but I cannot call someone who has strayed so far from humanity my parent. The only parent I love is Mom. Dad, Linda, the sin of hurting my dear mom and aunt is grave. Please leave our home immediately. Mom, I'm sorry for being such a son. I wanted to eat more of your cooking. Mom, I'm sorry. Thank you. My face was soaked with tears as I finished reading. Mike, my dear Mike. My first child. The gentle big brother. My treasure. Even though he must have been suffering the most, he was still worried about me and Anne. I will never forgive you both. I yelled at Tom and Linda with all the strength I could muster. After the funeral, I divorced Tom. I was just jealous. He was better looking, smarter, and he even married Linda, whom I loved. It's all because of Mike that I... He kept grumbling, but he went silent after I demanded a hefty compensation. I didn't need such a childish husband. Mike was the one who severed that tie. I kicked Tom out of the house. Big bed included. I didn't need that thing. As for Linda, after she went crying back to her parents, I disown you, her father sternly told her. She had no choice but to rent an apartment, too ashamed to step outside. But she'll have to work to live, spending her life in fear of others' judgments. Tom, it seems, was bad-mouthed by his co-workers who attended the funeral and avoided by female employees just for approaching them. Overwhelmed by shame, he resigned. It's his own fault. He should suffer for what he did to Mike. And I started a new life. And came back home, saying it was hard to live alone on a part-time salary. I want to live with Mom after graduating. Oh, and Mike's here too. Our living room is adorned with many photos of Mike and Anne. Mike, with his gentle smile, patting Anne's head. 5 years later, Anne got married and continued to live with us. She recently gave birth to a boy. I'll cherish this child no matter what. She's fully embraced motherhood. He smiled. Just like Mike when he was a baby. Yes, their eyes do look similar. I smiled, looking at Mike's baby photos, and gently stroked the baby's head. I wish I could see Mike. I muttered, Mom, I'll always be with you. Wiping away tears, I felt as if I heard. So, Mom, you secretly helped with Walter's study abroad expenses without telling me, huh? Did you really support him expecting something in return with that little money, planning to rely on Walter instead of us for your old age? I don't understand how my son Hugo knows about the secret support, but I have no intention of depending on my grandson Walter for my future living. Yes, I did support him. But that was with personal money from Scott and me. You have no right to nag about it. And what's wrong with helping Walter? Deciding it's less trouble to be honest than to awkwardly deny and keep secrets, I replied assertively to Hugo's high-handed attitude. People can say whatever they want, but Walter is about to get married soon. After the wedding, he'll be living with us, so relying on Walter would be futile. Never did I imagine hearing about my beloved Walter's wedding in such a manner, and not even directly from him but through Hugo, of all people, mixing various emotions into a complex feeling. Yet, seeing Walter getting married is a joyous occasion for me, who has watched him grow up since he was little. Walter is at that age already. When is the wedding? Mom, even if Walter invites you to the wedding, you better not come. You'll be in the way. To be treated as a nuisance by Hugo, my own son, makes me wonder if he even remembers how much I've raised him. Being treated so much as a nuisance made me suspect if there really was a reason he didn't want me at the wedding. All right, I won't go even if Walter invites me. At that point, I decided to accept Hugo's assertion for the time being and see how things would unfold. And then, on the day of the wedding, I was visiting the venue wearing a dress passed down from my mother. Christiana, I've brought the newsletter. On a weekday afternoon, enjoying my usual lunchtime variety show, my neighbor came over, calling out my name loudly, to deliver the neighborhood newsletter. After a brief chat for about 10 minutes, I mentioned I was boiling water, effectively ending the conversation so it wouldn't drag on. This is because, during this time slot, the lunchtime variety show always has interesting segments on air. Today's feature was Grandchildren and Grandmothers Special. The segment explored the secrets behind the close relationships between grandchildren and their grandmothers. My name is Christiana, and I too have a lovely grandchild. In my 20s, when my husband Scott and I were blessed with 2 sons, I worked while raising them. After our sons grew up and became independent, Scott and I looked forward to spending a quiet retirement together, blessed with grandchildren, enjoying a typical happy life. One day, our eldest son's family, specifically our grandson Walter, who was still a college student at the time, came to stay at our house. He wanted to spend his summer vacation here to concentrate on his studies. Walter, who had been close to Scott and me since he was little, treated us the same way even as a college student. We were delighted by this. That evening, I made Walter's favorite dish from when he was little, my special fried chicken. Seeing his adorable smile, reminiscent of when he was in elementary school, naturally made both Scott and me smile. After dinner, while watching TV, Walter, with a serious look on his face, said he wanted to talk to us about something. It was about studying abroad. Hugo's family, my son and his wife, aren't exactly wealthy. It's not that they don't have money, but Hugo seems to have a significant resistance to spending money. Walter was able to go to college thanks to his own efforts, having seen his parents' financial attitudes. Walter must have suppressed his desire to study abroad, considering his parents' situation. However, as discussions about studying abroad became more serious at university, he found it difficult to talk to his parents about it and came to us for advice. I want to study abroad for my education, but I can't talk to my parents about it. So, I came to ask you Granny and Grandpa for advice. Walter's concern seemed more serious than we imagined, and looking at the study abroad materials he handed us, it was indeed a matter that couldn't easily be discussed with Hugo. Hugo is quite the frugal one, going so far as to say if Walter can't get a scholarship for college, he shouldn't go at all. Still, unable to give up on college, Walter managed to go by combining scholarships and the savings he had secretly amassed from part-time jobs since high school. However, the amount needed this time was beyond what he could handle on his own. Walter's grades in college were excellent, and the school offered some support, but the amount he had to pay out of pocket was far more than a college student could afford. That's why he came to us for help. After some thought, Scott and I decided to secretly use some of our retirement funds to cover the rest of Walter's study abroad expenses without telling Hugo. Even though we discussed it, are you sure this is all right? This money is for you from both of us, okay? It's fine, it's for your sake, dear Walter. Besides, you have a future. It's better for you to use it than for us. Thanks to our support, Walter was able to fulfill his dream of studying abroad. A few years later, sadly, Scott passed away due to a chronic illness, and my two sons are now arguing fiercely about my future care. The younger son and his wife, currently living abroad due to work, think it would be difficult for me, now elderly, to move and live overseas. When this was brought up, Hugo, the elder, accused the younger of trying to push the responsibility of my care onto him. I don't want to do it. Taking care of Mom in her old age? We've got our own family's livelihood to think about. And if we have to add Mom's care into the mix, do you have any idea what will happen? It pained me to see my sons arguing loudly, especially since their argument was about my future care. Both of you, I'm fine on my own. Besides, there's no need for you to fight over me. I told the two of them that if it came to this, I would make it clear that from now on, I intended to live by myself. However, when Hugo heard my words, he pressed me further as if he had remembered something. Speaking of which, Mom, you secretly supported Walter's study abroad expenses, didn't you? Did you support him with such small change expecting a return, planning to rely on Walter instead of us for your old age? I don't know why Hugo knows about the secret support for Walter's study abroad expenses, but I have no intention of relying on Walter for my future life. Yes, I did support him. But that was with personal money from Scott and me. You have no right to nag me about it. And what's wrong with helping Walter? Deciding that it was less trouble to be honest than to deny and keep secrets, I responded boldly to Hugo's aggressive attitude. You can say whatever you want, but Walter is about to get married soon. After the marriage, he'll live with us, so relying on Walter would be pointless. Never would I have imagined learning about my beloved Walter's marriage in such a manner, especially not from Hugo instead of Walter himself, mixing my feelings with various emotions. Yet, for me, who has watched Walter grow up since he was little, nothing could be more joyous than his marriage. Walter is already at that age, huh? So when is the wedding? Don't you dare come to Walter's wedding, Mom, even if you're invited. You'd just be in the way. To be treated like a nuisance by Hugo, my own son, makes me wonder if he remembers how much I've done for him. Being treated this way makes me suspect there must be a real reason he doesn't want me at the wedding. Understood, I won't go even if Walter invites me. At that point, I decided to accept Hugo's assertion for the time being. And then, as time passed, on the wedding day itself, I arrived at the venue in a dress that had been passed down through my family for generations. Guests of Walter and the bride, Marion, were gathering one after another at the reception venue. Among the guests were classmates from their student days and colleagues from work, various people who came to celebrate their marriage. I was told that I had to show the invitation at the reception to enter, so I headed to the reception, where I saw Hugo. Seeing me, who was not supposed to be here, Hugo became furious with a terrible look on his face. You promised not to come even if invited. Why are you here? I led him away to a secluded spot in the venue to avoid disturbing the other guests with a loud voice, and we started to talk. Indeed, I said I wouldn't come on Walter's invitation. But I am here at the invitation of the bride, Marion. I haven't broken any promise. I left Hugo, still angry, saying that I couldn't be late for the ceremony and didn't continue the conversation, quickly leaving the spot. All the guests gathered in the venue, and the ceremony was about to start. I sat in the seats for Marian's guests, eagerly awaiting the appearance of the couple. Feeling unsettled, I caught Hugo's eye as he sat on the groom's side. Seeing me sitting on the bride's side, as I had said, he seemed confused, and despite the joyous occasion of the wedding, he looked somewhat perplexed. I decided to leave Hugo be for the moment and enjoyed lively conversations with the guests invited by Marian, sitting on the bride's side as well.
Mom, why did you come? We have to get you to leave before the reception starts.
As the ceremony began and the bride and groom appeared in beautiful white attire, the venue burst into applause and cheers. I, too, found myself unusually excited by the sight of the couple's beauty, sending them applause as hearty as anyone else despite my aging body. When they stood before the priest and pledged their eternal love as a family, I was moved, remembering Walter as a small child and marveling at how he was now getting married. It was a moment that made me feel the passage of time. Surrounded by a large gathering of guests, they exchanged a kiss of commitment. I suddenly remembered my own wedding with Scott. Celebrated amidst many guests, a day so moving I couldn't stop my tears. And now, at Walter's wedding, I find myself unable to stop the flow of large tears. To experience this emotion again, this time at my grandchild's wedding, made me think that living a long life is indeed worth it. After the ceremony ended and the bride and groom had changed, the reception was about to start. Preparing for the reception, I went to the restroom before returning to the venue, but just before entering, I was stopped by Hugo. Without saying anything, Hugo pulled me into a family room and suddenly confronted me. "Why are you sitting on the bride's side? I told you right from the start that I was invited by Marian. How many times do you need me to say it before you're satisfied?" Our loud argument seemed to be heard outside as Walter came into the room, knocking on the door. He stepped between us, calming an angry Hugo, and I explained the situation to him. Seeing Walter enter, and a few seconds after him, Marian joined as well. Walter and Marian, understanding everything, slowly and methodically explained to a calmed Hugo why I was there and why I was invited by the bride, sitting us down on the sofa. First, why I'm at Marian's wedding reception on her invitation is because I was Marian's middle school teacher. During her middle school years, Marian was going through a sensitive period, struggling with friendships and sometimes unable to attend school. As her teacher and as an individual, I was concerned for her. I visited her house several times to listen to her, calling out desperately through the door even if she wouldn't come out. Marian, who wouldn't respond to her family's questions, opened her heart only to me. Thanks to that, I was able to understand the cause of Marian's friendship troubles. It was a misunderstanding between them, and I helped them reconcile their friendship. Afterward, I helped Marian catch up with the studies she missed during her absences from school by tutoring her one-on-one after school hours, allowing her to successfully get into her desired high school. I vividly remember her saying to me at her high school graduation, tears in her eyes, "Ms. Christiana, you saved my life." Even after that, Marian often sent me letters, seasonal greeting cards at the end of the year, and birthday cards, maintaining our exchange without meeting in person. I knew from her letters that she was in a relationship. Marian met Walter in the same international student team at university. They went on dates, sharing stories about school and their personal lives, gradually growing closer until they naturally became a couple. When Walter was deciding on the guest list for the wedding, he thought of inviting longtime friends, which is how my connection with Marian came to light. Walter had intended to invite me from the start, but was mistakenly informed by Hugo that I was too ill to attend the ceremony. However, Marian had sent the invitation to me before Walter did, and she had already received my RSVP to attend, which caused some confusion. However, I had felt uneasy knowing that Marian, who had sent an invitation to me before Walter did, had already received a confirmation of attendance. So, to greet and verify the facts, the two visited my house with a gift and discovered the true nature of their unease. Was everything Dad said a lie? And to do such a thing on our own wedding day? Walter, having heard the story from me, was furious and suggested a plan to teach him a lesson. For that purpose, I decided to attend as a guest on Marion's side, and we made it our secret not to reveal my attendance to anyone until the day of the event. Now, as we are here at the wedding, the time has come to execute what we have thought and decided. Dad, I'm sorry, but the talk about living together after getting married is off the table now. We've decided to live with Granny. Walter expressed his intention to Hugo to cancel the planned cohabitation with his parents and instead live with me. Granny is a very important benefactor to Marion. Why do you act so high and mighty, threatening not to come to the wedding and disregarding such a person? I'm sorry to Hugo, but Christiana is a lifesaver to me. Without Christiana, I wouldn't have met Walter. I would have remained in a hopeless situation. Granny is more important to us than you, Dad, and the others. That's why we've decided to live with Granny instead of you. Hugo was speechless and overwhelmed by Walter and Marion's unexpected declaration. Walter, why would you say something like that? If you live with Mom, the two of you will have to take care of her. Are you sure about that? It's not just that Dad doesn't want to live with Granny, right? You don't want to take care of her yourself, and on top of that, you think Granny has no money because you gave me some. It seems Walter's words were indeed true. As Walter lectured, Hugo's face became flushed, and his irritation became evident. Such a thing is impossible. Me, your father, to suggest that I live relying on you guys. No, Dad, that's exactly what's happening right now. I can't live with someone like that, and I don't want to. I don't want our happy marital life to be intruded upon by someone like you, Dad. We choose Ms. Christiana, who is more of a benefactor to us than Hugo. Hugo, with a selfish mindset of not wanting to lower his current standard of living, attempted to persuade Walter and the others. In reality, Walter and Marion had secured jobs at a foreign corporation through connections made while studying abroad. The foreign corporation offered very good salaries. After getting married, they planned to live in a spacious high-rise apartment in the city center and eventually build a large house back in their hometown. The reason Hugo and his spouse were so eager to live with Walter's family was targeted at these assets. Walter believed it was natural for a son to take care of his parents, but if a father couldn't do the same for his own parents, he declared he wouldn't take care of Dad either. I'm sorry. Walter, my bad. So please, don't abandon me. Mom, I'm sorry. I was a fool. It was all my fault. I apologize. It seems Hugo realized from the strong feelings of Walter's family. Family must be cherished. If not, one will be abandoned by their own family and will not be able to lead a decent life. Feeling this, being made to realize this, Hugo desperately apologized to me and Walter. But, of course, Hugo's apology, meant only to protect himself, held no meaning, and not just to me, but to his own son.
Please, say no more.
Walter quietly refused Hugo's plea for forgiveness and said nothing more. However, his expression conveyed a wish that he no longer show an embarrassing side as a father. Seeing his face, Hugo understood everything and without saying anything further, just lowered his head, leaving all decisions to Walter. The issue with Hugo was temporarily resolved, and it was discussed that the upcoming reception should carry on as if nothing had happened, not wanting to spoil the atmosphere of the venue or the mood of the guests. We want this wedding to be something special. Despite everything, we want it to end with smiles. So, please. And I'm asking too. I want the ceremony to be a success no matter what. So, I want us to welcome the reception with smiles. Please, help us. Touched by Walter and Marion's earnest request, I agreed to their proposal and promised to act as if nothing had happened at the reception to avoid confusing the guests. The reception went smoothly, and Hugo sat quietly on the groom's side, watching the couple in their new outfits being celebrated by the guests around them. Various events were prepared for the reception, and the Walter couple enjoyed them while moving through the program. Finally, they walked down the aisle prepared outside, and Marion, the bride, performed the bouquet toss. Here it goes! Catch! The pink bouquet flew through the air, drawing a beautiful arc, and somehow, it reached me. I haven't held a bouquet since my own wedding, decades ago. Is the wedding god suggesting I find someone other than my late Scott now? Miss Christiana! Amazing! I really shouldn't be keeping this. As I attempted to return the bouquet to Marion, she quietly grasped my hand to stop me, indicating her agreement. Please keep it, Miss Christiana. With this, you can be happy with Scott forever. And if you keep it, it feels like we will be happy too. Marion's words gently touched my heart, and tears welled up in my eyes. Moved by my tears, Marion, and surprisingly Walter too, had tears in their eyes, creating a peculiar scene where only the bride, groom, and I were crying, observed by the surrounding guests. The ceremony continued with laughter and tears, and concluded successfully with the departure of the bride and groom. Following the ceremony, as I had promised Hugo, Walter and Marion started living with me in their new home. Are you sure about this? It's your new home, and your newlyweds. Won't I be in the way of your married life? Not at all. We decided this together, and living with you, Miss Christiana, is like a dream come true. Marion answered brightly and innocently, and Walter, who had just returned to the living room from unpacking, added with a smile. Granny is our benefactor. If Granny hadn't provided the money for my studies, I wouldn't be where I am today, and this marriage wouldn't have happened. I'm truly grateful. Receiving heartfelt thanks from the two I've known for so long made my eyes well up, perhaps due to my age. I hadn't felt so happy to receive words of gratitude since my late Scott told me on our first wedding anniversary. Thank you for marrying me. Ever since. Perhaps, when my time comes, I will remember Scott and these two. I'm so glad they've grown into such kind-hearted individuals. It feels as if their happiness is my own. And now, Dad has also promised to send monthly allowances to Granny and help with daily life, showing his remorse. It finally feels like everything has turned out well. Since the wedding, Walter had been intentionally avoiding contact with Hugo and his wife. However, fearing that he might be completely abandoned, Hugo promised to send money every month and assist with living expenses to maintain their relationship. Still, he prepared a somewhat forceful measure, warning that if something happened to me when he wasn't looking, he would completely sever ties. May I also say something? Both of you, thank you for growing up so splendidly since those days. Thank you for thinking so much of me. Truly, thank you. I couldn't help but hug them both. Overwhelmed with joy, I hugged them a bit too tightly without realizing it. In response to their gestures, I hugged them back tenderly, feeling a breeze of happiness flow through our new home, still dotted with cardboard boxes. I've made a certain decision about living with these two. I'm going to be a powerful granny. Living so robustly that I won't need any care, not touching the money sent to me but secretly saving it for my great-grandchildren to use one day. And I plan to live long enough to see my great-grandchildren grow up and marry someone special, just like these two.